finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo, bringing you good conversation, arts and entertainment, ethical dilemmas and a sense of the ridiculous too. An agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom over Northern Ireland is imminent. Will there be a restoration of devolved government in the province or a political car crash if the Democratic Unionist Party refuses to accept the deal? Have the progress over Northern Ireland and the turmoil amongst Scottish nationalists following the resignation of Nicola Sturgeon strengthened the union or not? 1 year after Russia invaded Ukraine, whose endurance is most fragile? Russia's, Ukraine's or NATO's? Two brothers spent the best part of 5 years searching the bed of the North Sea to find a 17th century royal warship, and the haul has popped up in an important exhibition in Norwich. And with the British Kebab Awards this week, it's meet and fitting that I should sample this £2.2 billion industry. That's all after the news with Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak says he's giving it everything to achieve a new deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol, but has insisted it's not done yet. Speaking to the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister said he's hopeful of a positive outcome with the European Union, describing it as unfinished business. He said it's vital to ensure a return to power sharing in the province. The DUP has refused to form an executive instalment in protest over the current Brexit deal, while MP Sammy Wilson says the party hasn't even seen a proposal yet.
What we do know is that there doesn't appear to have been any deal on the central issue which affects Northern Ireland, and that is the imposition of EU law. All of the problems that we face with not able to get goods from GB, checks on goods coming from GB and disruption to our economy stems from the fact that we're under a different set of laws than the rest of the United Kingdom, and therefore checks are required to make sure we're complying not with British law but with Brussels law.
Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a sixth person in connection with the attempted murder of an off-duty officer in Omagh. John Caldwell was at a sports centre with his son, where he coaches a youth football team, when he was shot. The Detective Chief Inspector remains critically ill in hospital. The Italian Coast Guard says 43 migrants have died after a shipwreck. Authorities say 27 bodies were found on a beach in the southern region of Calabria, and more have been found in the water. It's reported the boat was carrying migrants from Iran, Pakistan and Afghanistan when it crashed against rocks during rough sea weather. There were around 80 survivors. The former US National Security Advisor, John Bolton, has said he would be willing to run for the Republican nomination if it stopped Donald Trump from getting it. Mr. Bolton, who served under Donald Trump and was a former US ambassador to the UN, said it was important that he didn't win the nomination for the 2024 presidential election.
I think it's very important that Donald Trump not be the nominee of the Republican Party in 2024. I think he can be defeated. I'd certainly like to help out in making that happen. And if I think being a candidate myself does show a path to getting the nomination and to winning in November of next year, then I'll get in.
Labour is calling for ministers to label the Wagner Group as a terror organisation. The shadow Foreign and Home Secretaries are accusing the Russian mercenary group of being a terror outfit which commits appalling atrocities. Members have been fighting alongside the Russian military in areas of eastern Ukraine. Social housing managers will be required to study for qualifications to drive up standards following the death of a 2-year-old boy. Awab Ishak died in December 2020 from a respiratory condition which was caused by mould at his home in Rochdale. The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, announced the response after acknowledging that social housing residents are being inexcusably let down. Housing expert Richard Blanco says the move should protect vulnerable tenants, but says there's more still to be done.
One of my concerns is that, I want this to trickle down to frontline housing officers because they're often the ones that are going out and doing the visits. And indeed, I'd like to see more visits because what we've found since COVID is that a lot of the work has been done remotely and housing officers have not been going out enough to actually meet tenants and see with their own eyes what's going on.
The former Home Secretary has urged the Chancellor to halt the planned corporation tax rise in his budget next month. It's expected to increase from 19% to 25% in April. Priti Patel says now is not the time and called for an end to government interference with business. Well, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the move will make for a fairer tax system. Police in Scotland say the body of a man and his dog found in Glencoe are those of missing hiker Kyle Sambrook and his beagle. The 33-year-old from Yorkshire went missing whilst walking in the Lost Valley area of the Glen last weekend. His death is not being treated as suspicious and his family have been informed. You're up to date on GB News. Now, though, it's back to Michael.
Well, welcome back. Russia invaded Ukraine a year ago, and NATO's hero, President Zelensky, has been urging his Western backers to increase and speed up their support as Russia mobilises for an expected spring offensive. NATO had a diplomatic success when Hungary joined the leaders of the so-called Bucharest Nine of Eastern European states in a joint declaration condemning Russia. China's top diplomat Wang Yi met Putin in Moscow, and Russia later thanked Beijing for its consistently balanced position on Ukraine. Will China supply arms to Russia? Away from the jaw, there's the reality of the war. It is estimated that at least 100,000 of each side's soldiers have been killed or injured in the conflict, and thousands of civilians have died, with more than 13 million people made refugees or displaced within Ukraine. To assess the situation, I'm joined by Dr. Liam Fox MP, like me, a former Defence Secretary, but a more recent one than I. I wonder, Liam, it's very nice to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
How you assess the solidarity of NATO so far. Are you content with it?
I think that we need to ensure that two things happen. One is that we, as you say, increase and speed up the amount of weaponry that we're supplying to Ukraine, and the other side is the political solidarity. One, I think, is performing better than the other at the present time. I think especially the United States and the United Kingdom, have been very good at giving what Ukraine has been asking for: anti-tank weaponry, anti-aircraft guns, missiles, and so on. I think the problem there is that Russia is moving on to a war footing in terms of production. And so it's not just what we're giving, it's how quickly we're giving. And it's one thing to say we will give Leopard tanks throughout the year. Ukraine needs them now so that it can get momentum on the battlefield, and that is crucial, I think, to maintaining that second part, which is the international political solidarity. And I think that we need to recognise that one of the weaknesses in the NATO position has been, frankly, a failure of deterrence in recent years. And deterrence is not just, as you know, having sufficient weaponry, but the will to use it. And we watched while Putin went into Georgia and then into Crimea. We had the humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan. All of those were, in my view, a failure of political as well as military deterrence.
I worry about a certain complacency on the Allied side. There's now a kind of assumption that Russia is going to lose. This seems to me not to be inevitable. I mean, Russia can always draw on many more fighters, and we don't know yet whether China might supply armaments. We do know that Iran is doing so. We have certainly not moved to a war footing in this country, as far as I know. And by a war footing, I mean rates of production, which would ascertain that we could provide weapons to Ukraine on a continuing basis. Do you see evidence that our industry is at that level of production that would be required to sustain the Ukrainian defence?
Well, I think, first of all, the analysis that you make is entirely correct. Russia has always in its history been willing to bleed its country dry, both its people and its economy, to fulfil the policies of the various tyrants it's had. This time is no different. Russia, in its economy, is moving towards greater armament production, and they don't really care how many young men die in Putin's vainglorious campaign. The question for us is, are we able to both increase production to supply Ukraine while restocking for the United Kingdom? And that's a question that many of us have been asking at Westminster, and I think that it's something that will be asked increasingly. Do we have not just the budget, but do we have the industrial production to be able to do both things at the same time? Provide weapons to Ukraine, but not be reducing Britain's own capability.
Yes, I mean, I've been quite shocked by the reduced level of our armaments, and this has been happening over many decades, but, you know, we're down to about 148 tanks and I think 18 surface ships and so on, despite the fact that we're spending 50 billion on defence. And, of course, we also know that the numbers on the books are not necessarily the numbers that you can actually deploy, because there are issues like servicing of the vehicles, whether they're ready to go, whether they have the trained crews, and how long you can maintain all of those things. Have you been caused new anxiety by the way we've been exposed, the thinness of our defence?
Well, I think there are two elements that concern me. One is that, and I think that we do need to ensure that as an alliance we've got sufficient capability across the board. Only the United States is big enough really to have full spectrum defence capabilities. Therefore, there's got to be a pretty brutal debate amongst the rest of the particularly European allies as to who does what. Britain contributes our nuclear deterrence. We've got our carrier strike capability, which includes, for example, the F-35 aircraft, which are not cheap. We've got the upgrading of our nuclear submarines. We've got our big increase in our cyber capability. Can the United Kingdom really be expected to provide a lot of the land defences for continental Europe, which should surely be the job of countries like Germany and France, who are part of continental Europe? So there needs to be a wider debate, and I think that we need to focus on what is in Britain's national interest in terms of our defence, and what do we need, frankly, to be encouraging our partners to do that they're not doing sufficiently.
If I were the Russians, I'd be waiting for Western allied fatigue with the war, and I'd be looking in particular towards the United States election. Ukraine might well be an issue during that election, and there might be a change of policy if the Republicans were to occupy the White House. You know a lot about what's going on in the United States, particularly on the Conservative side. Give me some feel for whether you think the Republicans are minded to switch the policy.
So I think on both wings, on the left of the Democratic Party and on the right of the Republican Party, you've got that traditional isolationist mentality and people saying, well, why should America be spending this amount of money on a war that has nothing to do with them? And I think the answer to your question really lies in the mainstream of both parties, recognising that what happens outside America will have an effect on America's security, either in the short, medium or long terms. And I think that there's still quite a strong level of support on both sides for the recognition that what is happening at the present time isn't just a battle about Russia versus Ukraine. It's about the maintenance of international law and whether we want to live in a world where there are rules. Russia wants to move to a world where might is right and we don't stick with law. That would have a huge impact on everything we do, not least the NATO political alliance. So I think that as long as the leadership in America remains in the mainstream of both parties, then it's relatively secure that American support will continue. It's if you get to the fringes of the parties, I think that you get that terribly isolationist, America doesn't need to bother about the rest of the world, which of course has always ended up in America becoming more involved in disputes around the world.
You and I were smirking quietly to ourselves. We saw John Bolton a moment ago on GB News saying that he's determined to stop Donald Trump getting back. For instance, if Donald Trump did get back, would that move this debate to the fringe?
I don't know. I think it's interesting, of course, that the incursions into Georgia and Crimea and Ukraine didn't occur on either the watch of George Bush or Donald Trump. I mean, that may be one conspiracy theory too far. But I think it's quite clear that the majority of the Republicans are in one place on this, and I don't think it would be advantageous to any candidate to be out of line with that broad Republican opinion. And I don't see that happening yet, although it's not out of the question. And then, of course, we have the very strange primary system that the Americans have,
of course,
which can throw up some quite odd results, largely based on how many candidates actually run. So I'm sure John Bolton, like the rest, will be considering the size of the field and whether that, in fact, would favour Donald Trump before he would be willing to throw his hat into the ring.
Let us briefly do a handbrake turn and talk about Northern Ireland. It looks as though an agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom is on the way. How do you think you'll feel about that, and how do you think the DUP will feel about that?
Well, like many Brexiteers, I voted for Boris Johnson's protocol, knowing that it was, from a purist point of view, deeply flawed, that it kept Northern Ireland inside European law, at least in some areas, and also that on a practical basis it put barriers into the UK's single market because of checks going to Northern Ireland. And I voted for that on the basis that we had to leave the European Union and we didn't want to remain in the permanent purgatory of where we were at that time. My view in doing so was that we would be able to improve on that deal as time went by and as the European Union saw the benefits of that and as the sort of tension and the hurt around Brexit dissipated. If we were able to get a better deal than that one, naturally I would support that.
Yes.
And I find it difficult to believe that any of my colleagues would say, because the deal is not perfect, we'll stick with the one that we currently find unacceptable. The logic of that position rather...
That's spoken of your colleagues. What about the DUP?
So I think the DUP will also be willing to see these restrictions diminished, again, in the hope that over time some of them might disappear. I think the hope that the European Union would give up entirely on European law applying to some elements in Northern Ireland is unlikely, given what the British government conceded in the protocol, but we can make progress on that. And I think that both sides will want to see the Northern Ireland Assembly up and running because that's the best guarantee to political stability and a reduction in violence in Northern Ireland. And this week we've had a warning of what that violence can look like and may just be the impetus that people need to get the political process moving.
Very interesting. Dr. Liam Fox, my friend of what, between 30 and 40 years, I suppose?
Longer than either of us probably care to remember, Michael.
Lovely to have you on GB News. Thank you very much. So is the stalemate over Northern Ireland about to be broken? Sources close to the Prime Minister say that it is inching towards a trade deal with the European Union. Rishi Sunak is reportedly close to an announcement. The Northern Ireland Protocol, agreed under Boris Johnson, requires Northern Ireland to follow some EU laws so that goods can flow freely over the border into the Republic of Ireland, which is within the European Union, without checks. It has necessitated controls between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and they are greatly resented by Ulster Unionists. GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood joins me now. Tom, thank you very much for coming on the programme. Do you have a feel on this vital point of whether the DUP is likely to accept this deal?
It's a really interesting question, a crucial question, and indeed many Conservatives have said they will take their lead from the DUP in terms of what is the position they take on the eventual deal. The trouble is, at the moment, the DUP say they haven't seen the actual text of the deal. They've had briefings, they've had meetings, they've spoken with officials and indeed the Prime Minister himself. Yet when it comes to the crucial wording, that's what they'll be going off, and that, of course, has not yet been published in any way. And the real interesting point here is about the particulars of the deal. We've got a flavour of what might be within it. We know that there will likely be a red lane and a green lane. A green lane for goods going from GB to Northern Ireland that were staying in Northern Ireland. They will have much reduced checks, and that will undoubtedly be beneficial for Northern Ireland. There'll also be a red lane for those goods that are likely to travel on to the Republic. They will still be checked as before. But really, when we look at the more crucial details, will the United Kingdom be able to change the level of VAT in Northern Ireland? Currently, it can't in the same way it can in Great Britain. Will there be liberalisations with regard to the state aid regime, which is currently controlled by EU restrictions in Northern Ireland, but not in the rest of the UK? These are some of the crucial questions that we don't have clear answers to yet, and it's why the next 24 hours will be incredibly important.
Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. Tom Harwood there confirming that there is not at the moment a yes or no answer to the question whether the DUP will sign up to this deal. Well, for nearly a decade, Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, championed Scottish independence. Despite a so-called once-in-a-generation referendum in 2014, where the Scottish people voted to stay in the United Kingdom, Miss Sturgeon has been pushing for a second referendum. Her fall from public favour and her departure appear to weaken the SNP and to push back the independence cause. And coupling that with the rapid progress of Northern Ireland, is the union now looking less insecure than it was? Joining me now, Peter Riddell, former director of the Institute for Government, and constitutional expert Dr. Craig Prescott, lecturer in law at the University of Bangor. Welcome, both of you, to GB News. Peter, first of all, if I may, let's deal with the easier question, I think. Do you think that there has been a change in Scotland which has probably pushed back the cause of Scottish independence, pushed back the likely date of a second referendum?
I don't think it's made very much difference to when a referendum will occur, because in a sense, under Nicola Sturgeon, there was a bit of an illusion. The belief that she was saying that possibly the next British general election would count as a referendum, remembering the SNP government lost a case in the Supreme Court at the end of last year on its ability itself to have a referendum. So it said, right, we'll use the next general election to do it. That was always unrealistic. The simple reason, look at the polls. There isn't a consistent majority for independence in Scotland. Indeed, the figures, if anything, have moved slightly against it. So because of that, it was never going to happen in the short term. So in many respects, Nicola Sturgeon had run out of road on it. What's happened now is that all the candidates, particularly the two front runners, are admitting there'll have to be a rethink. So what we're having is an aspect of realism about something which was probably not going to happen anyway in the short term.
Thank you, Peter. Let me turn to Dr. Craig Prescott. Let's put the two questions together for you, Craig. Do you think that between the events in Scotland and the forthcoming events related to Northern Ireland, that the union is looking less insecure than it was?
I think I agree to some extent with Peter as regards Scotland, at the very least, that, you know, it perhaps doesn't change the reality, maybe change the perception of the reality. With Northern Ireland, you know, I think if we have a more stable sort of footing and a more stable version of the protocol, then inevitably that will help facilitate the position of Northern Ireland in the Union. With the protocol as it is at the moment, you could potentially see if this was 10, 15 years down the line, the centre of gravity would perhaps naturally shift towards the Republic away from the rest of the UK. If you have that green zone, then maybe that just facilitates trade between the rest of the UK and the Northern Ireland in a much easier way than is the case now.
Peter Riddle, back to you to talk about Northern Ireland, if you would. How are you feeling about the impending agreement? And do you have any sense of whether this is likely to lead to a return of devolved government, or whether it's just going to be a bust-up between some Tories and the DUP and the government?
Well, I think it could be a bust-up between the government, some Tories, as you say, and the DUP. You posed the fascinating question there, Michael, which is, my hunch is some deal will go through Parliament, because the big difference from what happened before 2019, of course, is Labour will vote for a deal. And that will produce a majority. There are obviously very big political questions about the splits in the Tory party, but the DUP no longer has a veto. And I think that's quite important in it, although it may be very influential on some Tory MPs. But if it's still hostile to whatever deal has occurred, would it go back into power sharing? And you can argue it both ways. The current position suits the DUP quite well, given that the First Minister will be a Sinn Féin First Minister, and that they won't necessarily want to go back in it. There'll be enormous pressure from London and elsewhere for them to go back in. And also, remember, the elections, which are supposed to be triggered by a continuing stalemate, are continually being put off and being deferred. So I don't see suddenly a great change in Northern Ireland politics as a result of any deal. In the short term, it could produce more friction from part of the community. I mean, the DUP does not only speaks for part, and possibly a minority part now, of Northern Ireland political opinion.
Dr. Craig Prescott, Peter Riddle there saying that the DUP doesn't have a veto. That is true, it doesn't have a veto on the deal. It does, of course, have a veto on whether power sharing is resumed, because power sharing will only resume if the DUP are willing to serve in the Assembly and accept the First Minister, who will be from Sinn Féin. How do you see things?
Yes, that's absolutely right. But I think it goes to that point to then about what about the next Northern Irish Assembly election? I think there's an interesting parallel here between both the DUP and Nicola Sturgeon, in that perhaps they both reached the end of the road of their current approach. That there's a sense that they're having to rethink their position. DUP's position as being a veto player, is diminishing. And, they may not have total sway over these negotiations and approving any deal, much in the same way as Nicola Sturgeon's approach has now sort of come towards the end of its approach. End of the road there. And so I think the big issue now would be the Northern Irish Assembly elections, which, if there's no power sharing executive form, then we'll have another set of elections and take things from there.
Well, thank you to you both for sharing my sense that we've been at quite an important moment in our constitutional history. Dr. Craig Prescott and Peter Riddle, thanks to you both. Coming up, is there still space for Christianity in British politics? After the break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello again. Not very long ago, it was pretty much necessary for a Prime Minister to profess his or her Christian faith. It's still a requirement for the monarch to do so. Recent political leaders who were guided by their Christian faith include Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair and David Cameron. But in politics, much has changed. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is today a Hindu, about which, rightly, not much concern has been raised. Whilst the possibility of Kate Forbes becoming First Minister in Scotland has caused a rumpus. She is a member of the Free Church of Scotland, a Calvinist denomination. In honest answers, she says that she would not have voted for gay marriage, but were she to be elected leader, she would not seek to reverse the present law. Another candidate, Humza Yousaf, has declared that he is religious in private, but not in his political life, which seems to me to be rather what Kate Forbes is saying. Nonetheless, her leadership campaign may already have been wrecked. Her plight has led to the intriguing question of whether in today's Britain, Hindus and Muslims are acceptable as political leaders, but Christians are not. Timothy Stanley is a Catholic, as well as being an historian, journalist and broadcaster, and he joins me now. Tim, how very nice to have you on the programme. Welcome to GB News. Do you think that Christians are in some way being persecuted in this matter?
Not exactly. I think a certain kind of Christian is persecuted. So it's not only okay to be religious in modern British politics, it can actually be an advantage. And I've been struck, I sit in the press gallery many days, as a sketch writer for Telegraph. I'm struck by how many MPs are Christian, openly Christian, talk about how it informs their politics. But it's a certain kind of Christianity that's acceptable. First, it's a highly privatized, as in limited to the private sphere Christianity. So the formula is, I am personally a Christian, but it wouldn't necessarily affect my views on certain social issues. The other kind of Christianity that's acceptable is a left-wing Christianity. So it's all very well to say, yeah, I'm a Christian, it shapes my views, that's why I believe we should be good to the poor, or we should give more aid to people overseas. But if you're the kind of Christian where you say, and this extends, my Christianity extends to also saying that sex outside marriage is probably not part of God's design, then that's not acceptable. So the real problem with Forbes is not that she's religious. The problem is it's the certain kind of religion that she professes, which is now very out of touch.
OK, you have addressed that. You have addressed that in an analytical way, and I think there's a lot in your analysis. Now give me your view on that. Are you telling me that that's an acceptable situation, or do you rebel against it?
Oh, I think it's totally unacceptable. Don't get me wrong. I think it's quite offensive, because one thing it leads to is people lying. And you should never have that in public life. That's very unhealthy. Either it means that the politician who is an doctrinaire Orthodox Christian, either they're going to lie to the public and say, look, it doesn't affect the way I vote. And that must be a lie, because if you truly believe in God, it shapes your entire life, and therefore it's going to shape your politics. Or else, which is perhaps equally bad, they are going to change their beliefs in order to reflect what they think the electorate wants to hear. I don't like that either. Of the two candidates, Forbes versus Yusuf, I have far more time for Forbes, even if I'm probably theologically, I'm Catholic, she's Calvinist, as you said, we probably don't get along theologically. I have more time for her because there's a consistency and a coherence to what she's saying. Whereas what Hamza Yusuf is saying is that, personally, privately, I'm Muslim, but that won't affect the way that I vote on certain social issues. Well, that just doesn't square it for me, because if you believe very strongly, then there are some social issues in which you have to take a stand.
Tim, if you, as an elector, as a voter, believe strongly, for example, in gay marriage, and Forbes has told us that she would have voted against gay marriage, but she says that wouldn't affect her policy if she were leader. But are you entitled as a voter to say, well, I just find her opinion so repugnant and so contrary to my own that that's the reason why I don't want her to be leader? It's not the fact that she's religious, it's the fact that the opinion she holds as a result of her religion is one that I simply cannot accept in a leader. Is that legitimate?
Yes, I think that's entirely legitimate, which might sound contrary to what I've just said, but it's really not, because it's about choice in a pluralistic democracy. It makes perfect sense that if you're a gay person and wanted to get married, and finally the law has changed and you're allowed to get married, as far as you're concerned, this is who you are, and it is now a recognized legal and human right, in fact, some definition of it, then the idea that a politician would say, well, look, I'll let you do it, but I don't believe it's a I mean, that's kind of offensive. And so I understand entirely where some people on a values basis would say, so I can't vote for that person. If we accept at the same time that there are some people for whom marriage is distinctly a sacrament created by God between one man and one woman, and therefore they may well tolerate, they may well accept that under the law people can get married, they don't recognize it. If there's a place for them in politics as well, then I'm perfectly okay with people expressing a personal opinion and competing over values, because that's what people think privately. That's what they should say publicly.
May I just ask you one thing very quickly? You're a Catholic. Catholics aren't involved in the present debate, but a future Catholic, let's say First Minister or Prime Minister, the question might arise about that candidate's view on abortion, and we might have this debate all over again there. Do you think that's what's coming down the road?
We might do, but it depends on the kind of Catholic you get, because there are an awful lot of Catholics who are of the opinion that it's none of their business or they're absolutely fine with it. So there's a change that's taken place within churches, that many members of churches no longer hold those views themselves. I do personally. And we've had this with Jacob Rees-Mogg, who famously and very courageously stood up for what is Catholic proper, but just what is Catholic teaching on this subject. And I admire him for having done that. But actually, I suspect that the kind of people who make it in modern British politics have probably already changed their mind if they ever held a different opinion on that anyway. I held out very little hope for there ever being a doctrinally conservative Catholic becoming Prime Minister of this country.
Tim Stanley, a very interesting reflection on where we've got to on the question of Christianity and getting to the top of British politics. The government's long-awaited white paper on football governance was published this week. Originating from a fan-led review by the then Sports Minister Tracy Crouch in November 2021, the most controversial of the recommendations is the creation of an independent football regulator. The Premier League and the Football Association believe in self-governance, but many MPs from all parties think that the sport requires external regulation. At the heart of the debate is money. While superstar players earn thousands of pounds a week, many clubs are on the brink of financial ruin. For the first time, a football sustainability index has been compiled, showing the viability of clubs in the long term. In a moment, I'll be talking to sports writer and broadcaster Aidan McGee. But first, Niall Cooper is the CEO of Fair Game, the organisation behind the Football Sustainability Index. Niall, welcome to the programme. And tell me what your index shows, please.
It's a way of really ranking football clubs that are well run. So it looks at several different measures, which are good governance, financial sustainability, community engagement, fan engagement, and equality standards, which are all key parts of the fan-led review. So this is the first time that we've actually given and shown how well run our football clubs are. And I think that's vital, because one of the things when we talk about financial redistribution and within football, it shouldn't be given just to any old club, because there is a long catalogue of failures. It should be given to clubs that are well run. Basically incentivise change within the game, intensify culture change by highlighting and profiling the well-run clubs in our game. And that's how we believe that football can become sustainable long-term. That's the real key, I think, there, Michael, that we move towards this. And that's what Fair Game is advocating for. And that's what our sustainability index showed. It showed clubs that were doing well, and it showed clubs that were doing badly. And the parachute payments is one of those big elements that has influenced where people are in that table.
Niall, as you composed and published the table, did it incline you to want an independent regulator appointed by the government?
I think absolutely. I think it was really clear that that was the case, because what it highlighted was the catalogue of problems that have existed. So you've got clubs like Bury and Macclesfield that have basically had to restart all over again. You've got clubs like Bolton and Derby that survived just by the very skins of their teeth. And you've got a system where it's common that a football club will spend more on players' wages than it actually earns, which is clearly unsustainable. One of the greatest quotes I've heard over the last couple of years comes from Cambridge United, who said there are only two types of businesses that budget for a loss, and that's startups and football clubs. And he described Cambridge United as a 109-year-old startup. Clearly, that kind of way of operating is not sustainable. We need to look at a new way of doing it. And the Sustainability Index highlights where the gaps are.
But Niall, you have much more faith in government regulation than I do. I'm a veteran of government, and it makes me extremely sceptical of government regulation. Can I ask you, which government regulator do you think this should be modelled on?
So what we're looking at is, I think there's two things. The FCA, Ofcom was the other one that's come into play on here. But I think what we need to look at is not just looking at a sport regulator, but looking much wider, looking for the very best examples. And I think that's the real key over the next few months, to make sure that we have a regulator that is 100% fit for purpose, has the resource to be able to deliver, and has the teeth to deliver change. And you're right, Michael, there are plenty of regulators that haven't been that successful, but those are not the ones that we want to follow on. But what is clear is that in the history of our game, the current setup is not good enough. And we've tried to get a better way of doing this for decades now. And this is the first opportunity to really develop and get a far better system in place. So, Michael, we need to find the best regulators, we need to find the best examples, and we need to do that. And there are out there, and that's what the challenge really has to be now. We don't want to follow the bad examples, for which, Mike, I'm sure you've got hundreds of examples up your sleeve that you can say, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And that's exactly what we need to learn from.
Niall Cooper, congratulations on compiling the index, and thank you very much for being on GB News. Sports writer and broadcaster Aidan McGee joins me now. I have a feeling you might take a rather different view about a regulator.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, look, there are three key tenets to what a regulator wants to achieve. The first and the most important is the distribution model. Now, let me give you an idea of the direction of travel of this over the last 31 years since the Premier League was formed. The income gap, the revenue gap between the top division, which is the Premier League, as it was formed back then, still exists today, and the division below, which was then called Division 1, now called the Championship, was £11 million. Now, that's roughly what you would expect. It probably made for better competition. Now, that gap has expanded to £4 billion. It's an incredible leap in that period of time. It was never meant to happen that way, but I suppose we should have seen it coming. The Premier League was set up to allow rich clubs to take as much of a share of the pie within football as they possibly could. They felt they deserved it because they were the main wealth generators. Problem is, they're generating that money by playing the teams lower down. That's the whole idea of competition. The second tenet would be to stave off the threat of the Super League. Now, to that end, football governed itself 2 years ago because the whole idea, which was set up by the top 6 clubs, Tottenham, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City, and one other one is...
Well remembered so far.
Yeah, exactly, 5. I'll think of the other one in a minute. But that was set up and it died a death within 36 hours. I was at Stamford Bridge that night. You would think that Chelsea were one of the clubs who would be more in favour of it because, you know, they're the ones who've kind of fed into this as much, if not as much as anybody else in the last 30-odd years or so, or certainly the last 15, 20 years. And yet I was bowled over by the nature of the vociferous nature
the
of
fan
the process.
Response.
It was incredible. It was incredible. I mean, a news editor rang me and said, "Yeah, we're expecting a protest tonight," and I expected 20 people that evening. They're playing Brighton and Hove Albion at home, and the stadium in there was empty that night because we're still in COVID. And yet, so the protests were off the scale. So it died a death in 36 hours. It governed itself. That went away. Now, the third part of this is what Niall mentioned a moment ago. Bury, Bolton, Macclesfield, they've all hit financial difficulties. If you sorted the distribution model, then those instances, notwithstanding any bad governance, would not happen. Now, the problem with the Premier League clubs, they don't want to be passing down their profits down to the league below if the league below are going to use that to spend on wages. I think there will have to be a salary cap in the division below the Premier League.
It sounds as if you are arguing for regulation.
I think that there was a small case for it, but I don't think it needs a regulator. It doesn't need layer upon bureaucracy. There's a degree of permanence around a regulator. I think this problem can be sorted in the short term. Football probably deserves a regulator.
Rules more than a regulator? Is that what
rules? That's what I was saying. I don't know why the DCMS or someone, a government agency, can come in and say, listen, you need to sort out the distribution model, and go further than that and say, look, this is how we want you to do it, and then put it into practice and see how it works. I also don't think the financial fair play rules, which are meant to promote competition and promote good governance, are particularly fair either. For example, if you buy a club, you should have 3 years to throw money at it to alleviate any problems, and then prove that you're sustainable long term. Beyond that, I don't think a permanent model needs to be put in place.
Aidan, it is for me a great education to speak to you because I'm not very well informed about these issues. Thank you very much indeed to Aidan McGee and earlier to Niall Cooper. Coming up, is a good story enough to make great theatre, or does theatre require very much more than that? That's after the break.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
welcome back. It was 7 years in the making and represented a radical change to musical theatre. When Hamilton opened in 2015 in New York, it received almost universal acclaim for the way it told the story of one of the United States' founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, through a mixture of rap, hip-hop and traditional show tunes. Hamilton has become the standard by which new musicals are measured. Well, the latest being Sylvia, which charts the life of suffragette Sylvia Pankhurst. The arts editor of Express Online, Stefan Kyriazis, has seen it. Welcome back to GB News and to this programme. So, is Sylvia the new Hamilton?
It's certainly incredibly, there are huge parallels. It's very, very similar. Political story, social change, fight for freedom, predominantly black casts, very, very modern music. This time we even have a bit of Caribbean dance hall for Winston Churchill's mother, which is incredibly entertaining. So yeah, it's bringing history alive. It's changing the game in terms of entertainment, and it's a bold choice, and it's.
When you say it's changing the game, do you mean it's continuing what Hamilton did? This is not in itself a game changer, is it, Sylvia, or is it?
No. In terms of part of this new way that it's very relevant to modern audiences, but presenting it in a very historical setting. So you're kind of having this juxtaposition of the two, which normally you just get either a traditional setting or a modern setting. But it's a story that has to be told and that we all need to know more about, and I'm absolutely all for that.
Is there a but?
It takes on an awful lot. It's this time, Kate Prince, who's the creator, is from Zoo Nation. Her show, Message in a Bottle, used Sting's music to tell the story of the refugee crisis with absolutely no words and told an incredible story. This time, her lyrics, for me, very hard to live up to Lin-Manuel Miranda. I mean, there's incisive wit, there's also incredible emotion, there's the exuberance of it all. It doesn't quite measure up. So it's extremely entertaining. Didn't quite get my vote, but boom, boom.
Does it tell the story well?
It tells the story pretty well, but there's very, very broad strokes. So I think the problem is you have so much story to tell in terms of the actual history of it. But then the Pankhurst family, the dynasty of Mother Emmeline, which is played by the incandescent Beverly Knight, who elevates everything she's in, the dynamic between the mother, the daughter and the sisters is incredibly complex and very, very messy, and there's a lot of story to tell, plus the entire labour movement that was happening at the same time. Then the First World War comes in. You have an awful lot going on, and so it's just a little bit oversimplified. And
I was thinking this. I was on Wikipedia a few moments ago just reading through Sylvia's life.
Yeah.
And it is very complicated because she was different from her sister and she was different from her mother, and she went off into the East End and she was amongst the working class women, which the other women were not on the whole. And then she became a communist, and she became quite closely linked to Lenin after the Russian Revolution, and was taking advice from him. Then she had a sort of rupture with Lenin. Gosh, there's quite a lot to tell.
Absolutely, and the mother ends up as a Conservative politician. So there's a lot to cram in, and it's a very entertaining show.
What other shows did you want to tell us about?
Well, in terms of another show about social change, Standing at the Sky's Edge. Remarkable. National Theatre. I loved every second of it. Music by Richard Hawley, who's kind of Britpop, played a little bit with Pulp in the past. And it's the Sky Hill estate in Sheffield. So it's the story of 60 years of social housing set in 1960, 1989, 2015, 3 families in the same flat, from the first part of the excitement of the castle in the sky, social housing, moving forward to 1989, urban decay, bringing in, this time, a family of Liberian refugees. 2015, gentrification, posh people from London coming and telling all these stories filtered through, again, women, 3 incredible women at the centre of each family setting, rock music on stage, they're grabbing microphones, but also it's incredibly intensely moving, tells a wonderful story, and is also at the same time telling us all about society, change, what's happening to us, and also this time what we've lost in terms of family and in terms of social bonds, social support. There are so many everything I go to now gets a standing ovation. It's becoming a little bit redundant, but I promise you this time we surged to our feet, and I can't spoil the ending, but I'll get upset just thinking about it, but all you could hear was sniffing.
Oh, my goodness.
The whole audience was sobbing, and standing and cheering at this rock opera.
I was about to go until you said that. I was just thinking that the Full Monty was set in Sheffield, so that's kind of your middle period, I think, isn't it? As you come out of Sheffield Station, you look up, and there are those blocks of flats. They've been there, as you say, for all those years. I know exactly what you're talking about. Most interesting. The Greeks are back.
They are.
The good news for you.
We're back.
We were thinking more of the ancient Greeks in this case.
I'm not quite 2,400 years old, but how extraordinary stories that are over 2,400 years old. We've got Phaedra and we've got Medea, both on at the same time in London. Both two incredible performances. Janet McTeer at the heart of Phaedra, Sophie Okonedo, Medea. These stories don't die and they don't change, and they are universal and they are powerful and they are visceral.
These Greek stories, I might say Phaedra was also written up by Seneca, so it's Greek and Roman, but they're not always a bundle of laughs. There's quite a lot of...
Yes, it's tragedy. This is Greek tragedy. This is rending your flesh tragedy. But they're very much putting women front and central. Women's rage, women's needs, women's jealousy, women's power, women's loss of power. And that was happening then and is still a massive issue today. There's a lot more laughs this time in Phaedra. It's played because the Medea is just the story told as was, but on a modern stage. Phaedra is told in the most extraordinary rotating glass box, where the set keeps changing from a flat to a garden, to a Moroccan mountainside, to a restaurant. I've never seen anything like it. The staging is incredible. But also, it's played as a kind of social farce. This time she's a champagne socialist. So there's a lot of commentary about smug liberals, and there's a lot of easy laughs with that. But then it's such a magnificent production, but the lurch at the end into grief, and then the ending, which is, as you know, devastating, doesn't quite sit with the humour in that one, but it's such an experience. It's everything in the kitchen sink thrown at it, and shows that these stories, my God, they're still utterly relevant, and to be honest, a lot better than a lot of what is still being put on stage today.
Great theatre, at least some of it was great theatre for you. We started talking about Hamilton. I'm going to see Hamilton next week in New York City. Oh, wish me well. I've never seen it.
Take me with you.
Oh.
You're going to love it. It's absolutely extraordinary. Yes.
Well, I can't believe that I've gone this long without seeing Hamilton, but at last, that terrible absence in my life is going to be addressed, and I'm going to see Hamilton. Stefan Kyriazis, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about theatre. Coming up, the Beatles counted 8 days a week, but is working 4 days a week better for productivity? And why Theresa May, Nadhim Zahawi and Jeremy Corbyn share a passion. All of that is coming up after the weather. See you then.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead for much of the week, it's going to be dry and settled. There will be a few showers at times though, pushing in from the North Sea. And the reason for this is high pressure is in charge. It remains over the UK right through the week ahead, keeping it largely dry, though with a northeasterly breeze, a few showers will feed in, particularly across eastern areas. Through the rest of Sunday, we'll see clearing skies across much of central southern England and Wales, allowing a patchy frost to form. Northern England into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. We'll see a bit more cloud here as we move into the early hours, the risk of a few showers. Scotland also seeing those clear skies. Temperatures falling to -7, -8 across the glens of Scotland. Under the cloud, 3 or 4 degrees, and then a patchy frost also under the clear skies in the southwest. Cloud across eastern areas will push its way south and westwards quite quickly Monday morning, turning the skies quite grey, the risk of 1 or 2 light showers. Best of the sunshine holding on across northwestern parts of Scotland. There will be a few glimmers of bright or sunny spells elsewhere, but rather cloudy afternoon to come. Temperatures similar, 7 to 9 Celsius, so generally around average, perhaps if we get any sunshine in the southeast, creeping towards 10. Into the evening and overnight, Monday into Tuesday morning, we'll see variable amounts of cloud, probably more cloud compared to recent nights across England and Wales, meaning less risk of a widespread frost here. Perhaps under any clear spells, a patchy frost forming, staying quite cloudy for Northern Ireland. Clearer skies across Scotland, where temperatures once again falling below freezing. Towns and cities holding up a little bit higher compared to recent nights for the vast majority of us. So it does mean Tuesday will be a cloudier start to the day. Risk of showers moving in from the North Sea, perhaps a more organised band of rain and some hill snow moving into southeast England. One area to watch over the next few days, but largely staying dry. Temperatures generally around average. See you again soon.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo, bringing you good conversation, arts and entertainment. Coming up, can working fewer hours help you to produce more? I'll explore the 4-day working week. One of those what-if moments, James Stewart was lucky to survive a shipwreck, which many others didn't. He lived and became the Catholic King James II, later ejected from his throne by a Protestant revolution. I'll meet the brothers who spent years secretly lifting treasures from the wreck of the Gloucester. And Theresa May, Nadeem Zahawi and Jeremy Corbyn have all presented prizes at the British Kebab Awards. I can't aspire to such heights, but I can have a stab at sampling a few skewers. That's all after the news with Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak says he's giving it everything to achieve a new deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol, but has insisted it's not done yet. Speaking to the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister said he's hopeful of a positive outcome with the European Union. Describing it as unfinished business, he said it's vital to ensure a return to power sharing in the province. The DUP has refused to form an executive at Stormont in protest over the current Brexit deal. MP Sammy Wilson says the party hasn't seen any proposal yet.
What we do know is that there doesn't appear to have been any deal on the central issue which affects Northern Ireland, and that is the imposition of EU law. All of the problems that we face with not able to get goods from GB, checks on goods coming from GB and disruption to our economy stems from the fact that we're under a different set of laws than the rest of the United Kingdom, and therefore checks are required to make sure we're complying not with British law but with Brussels law.
Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a sixth person in connection with the attempted murder of an off-duty officer in Omagh. John Caldwell was at a sports centre with his son, where he coaches a youth football team, when he was shot. The Detective Chief Inspector remains critically ill in hospital. Authorities in Italy say 45 people have died after a ship got into difficulties off the country's south coast. 27 bodies were found on a beach in the southern region of Calabria, and more have been found in the water. It's reported the boat left from Turkey and was carrying migrants from Somalia, Pakistan and Afghanistan when it crashed against rocks during rough sea weather. There were 81 survivors and 22 are in hospital. The former US National Security Advisor, John Bolton, has said he would be willing to run for the Republican nomination if it stopped Donald Trump from getting it. Mr. Bolton served under Donald Trump and was a former US ambassador to the UN. He told GB News' Camilla Tominey it was important for the former president that he didn't win the nomination for the 2024 presidential election.
I think it's very important that Donald Trump not be the nominee of the Republican Party in 2024. I think he can be defeated. I'd certainly like to help out in making that happen. And if I think being a candidate myself does show a path to getting the nomination and to winning in November of next year, then I'll get in.
Labour is calling for ministers to label the Wagner Group as a terror organisation. The shadow foreign and home secretaries are accusing the Russian mercenary group of being a terror outfit which commits appalling atrocities. Members have been fighting alongside the Russian military in areas of eastern Ukraine. Social housing managers will be required to study for qualifications to drive up standards following the death of a 2-year-old boy. Awab Ishak died in December 2020 from a respiratory condition, which was caused by mould at his home in Rochdale. The Housing Secretary Michael Gove announced the response after acknowledging that social housing residents are being inexcusably let down. Housing expert Richard Blanco says the move should protect vulnerable tenants, but said there's still more to be done.
One of my concerns is that, I want this to trickle down to frontline housing officers, because they're often the ones that are going out and doing the visits. And indeed, I'd like to see more visits, because what we've found since COVID is that a lot of the work has been done remotely, and housing officers have not been going out enough to actually meet tenants and see with their own eyes what's going on.
The former Home Secretary has urged the Chancellor to halt the planned corporation tax rise in his budget next month. It's expected to increase from 19 to 25% in April. Priti Patel says now is not the time and called for an end to government interference with business. But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the move will make for a fairer tax system. And police in Scotland say the body of a man and his dog found in Glencoe are those of the missing hiker Kyle Sambrook and his beagle. The 33-year-old from Yorkshire went missing whilst walking in the Loss Valley area of the Glen last weekend. His death is not being treated as suspicious and his family have been informed. You're up to date on GB News now. It's back to Michael.
Thanks, Bethany. It started at the beginning of the 20th century to accommodate Jewish workers at a textile mill, and Henry Ford made it popular in the 1920s. The 5-day working week is the accepted norm for the majority of companies and industries in the Western world. Could that be about to change? The UK's largest ever study into a 4-day working week has just been published. 61 companies and nearly 3,000 workers took part in a 6-month trial. So far, nearly 30%, that's 18 companies, have decided to make it permanent. While it might improve some people's work-life balance, can working less time for the same amount of money increase productivity? Andrew Barnes is CEO of 4-Day Week Global, the company behind the trial, and Anne-Marie Lister is from Atom Bank, one of the companies that took part in the trial, and they're both here with me. Welcome to GB News. Andrew, what's it called, 4-day week global. It sounds like you have a rather committed position to begin with. How did you arrive at this committed position?
I was experimenting in my own company in New Zealand as to whether, in fact, I could improve productivity by asking my people to work less. And what we found was that productivity went up about 25%, and more people said they were better able to do their job working 4 days rather than 5. So many companies reached out around the world to us that what we did was create 4-day week global to help companies go down the journey and experiment for themselves.
So may I ask you, since you are committed and you set up the study, can we trust the study?
The research is independent of ours. It's coordinated out of Boston College in the United States. We had Cambridge University involved in the UK trial, but we've also run trials in the United States, Ireland. We're running one in South Africa and Australia and New Zealand, in each case with an independent university doing the research.
How does it happen that working less time increases the amount of work done?
My journey started because I found that there was research out there that said that people were only productive for 2.5 to 3 hours a day.
Gosh.
If you were Canadian, apparently 1.5 hours a day. So the thesis was, if you could find a different way of working, you only had to find 45 minutes of additional productivity in each of 4 days to deliver the same output. And if you think about it, there are a lot of things that prevent you being productive. It might be looking at your mobile phone, it might be being interrupted, it might be in too many meetings. So the idea is work differently, work smartly, think about what you're meant to be doing and focus on the output.
But forgive me, haven't you been rather defeatist? Because you start with the proposition that only 2.5 hours in the day is productive and you want to increase that by 45 minutes. Why not increase the 2.5 hours to 8 hours or whatever the working day may be? And the things that you mention, I well understand them. Of course, you know, we're all put off because we're doing our social media. I perfectly understand that. Of course, we're put off because people come over and talk to us, particularly in open plan offices. But why not address those issues? Say to people, look, I'm sorry, you can't consult your social media. And we're going to have 2 hours now where nobody leaves his or her desk to go to another person's desk. Why not address those things?
We do, as part of the process. That's exactly the point. We say to people, let's do these things differently. Now, as a consequence, you don't just get additionally 45 minutes. What you're finding is productivity increases enormously. So, for example, Microsoft in Japan did a simple experiment on reducing meeting times and got a 39.9% improvement in productivity. So what you're doing is harnessing the power of your people to rethink not just how they do things, but to look at their own behaviours. And the prize is they get time off. And because they get the time off, productivity actually gets better.
Anne-Marie has been nodding so vigorously all the way through what you've been saying. But Anne-Marie, presumably at one point you came to this proposition with a certain amount of scepticism. You didn't know whether this was going to work or not for your company. Tell me how you started.
So the backdrop of the pandemic, really, in terms of looking inside our organisation and outside in terms of what was impacting work, people. Our people were telling us that their well-being wasn't so great. And actually we wanted to come out of the pandemic as a bigger, stronger, better business. And if the research on 4-day a week is to be believed, as we did, that we thought it could actually meet both of those needs in terms of increasing productivity, increasing efficiencies in the organisation and people feeling better. And that's absolutely what we've seen throughout our trial, which we started in November 2021. We've since moved all of our people permanently to 4-day a week contracts starting from the 1st of January this year.
You're paying them the same?
Absolutely paying them the same. And all of our metrics that we've been monitoring from productivity, organisation-wise and customer metrics have positively trended in that time.
Do you mind telling me a little bit about your company, what kind of size it is, what kind of work that people are doing?
Sure. So Atom's the UK's first app-only bank. We help people save if they want to buy a house or if they want to build their business. We're 470 people, based primarily in Durham in the northeast, but we have people working around the country as well remotely.
And what do your offices look like? Are people in open plan offices?
Yeah, the office is open plan. It's a 500-seater office. We have about 150 people using that space at the moment. But yes, open plan. There are some smaller individual working spaces for those who need quiet time. So the office meets the needs of most people.
OK, and have you got most people back into the office, or are a lot of people still working from home?
So we operate a hybrid model, and we ask people to work wherever they are most productive for that piece of work that they're doing. So we have teams coming into the office, and we have a small office in London as well, if it's better and more productive that they work in person. But we have people coming in as they prefer an office working environment as well. So it's a mixture, and we leave that decision to our people.
Are you getting more production now out of 4 days than you were out of 5 days? And if so, what is the quantity? What is the increase?
So I guess in terms of productivity measures, some of our organisation measures that we've benefited from a reduction in sickness. The average UK sickness rate, I think last year was 4.6 days per employee, Atom's 0.6. That in itself makes you more productive and that there are more people to work. So we were running at 1.8 days and we've reduced to...
You're already much better than the national average.
We were.
But you've improved on that.
Yeah, so our turnover, so the number of people leaving our organisation has reduced, and that reduced by 10%. In comparison to the financial services sector, we're running 10% lower than their average attrition rate. Again, if you've got fewer vacancies, you've got more people to do the work, and you're saving on recruitment costs as well. And I honestly believe the happier that people are, our employee engagement score increased by 10%, the happier people are in their work, and the more interesting their work is, because we are removing inefficiencies from what they're doing, that plays into happier customers, and that's absolutely what we've seen in the last 12 months.
Andrew, can we do much better again? As you saw a moment ago, I wasn't madly impressed by your 2.5 hours at 45 minutes.
Nor was I, by the way.
So, I mean, we all want to do better than that, don't we? Can we?
Yes, I think we can. I think the whole essence of this is it's easy to get carried away on the concept of the 4-day week. What this is about working shorter hours. We call it the 100-80-100 rule. 100% pay, 80% time, 100% productivity. But the key thing here is working smarter. It's harnessing the power of your staff to identify what it is they should be doing, but quite critically, what it is they shouldn't be doing. And when you give that incentive, you actually get much higher levels of productivity. And we were already seeing 25% up, but I think the chances are this can get even better.
And you couldn't just do that within the 5-day week. In other words, identify all those things that are going wrong and just say, OK, within the 5-day week, we're going to get more productivity. You couldn't just do that.
We've been trying that for 80 years and it's not gone very well. So what I'm suggesting is actually just a change of behaviour. And also, remember, we've increased productivity by multiples as a consequence of things like technology. Why is a method of working designed for repetitive manufacturing in the 1920s relevant for the 21st century in the information age?
Do you have any regard to what people do with their spare time? Can we take it for granted that people will be happy with their extra spare time? Why might they not be? Well, for example, they might come under pressure to spend much more money. They might come under pressure to go out to the pub yet another evening. So are there any downsides to more free time?
There is a downside in that sometimes people don't know what to do with it, and we certainly found that in our company. Took people a while to adjust to more free time. But interestingly, in the UK survey, we found that men spent 27% more time looking after their kids. Now, that's not a bad thing. There was also indications people spent more time caring for families, for cooking, for doing hobbies. And there's some very interesting research out of Henley Business School that looks at precisely this and what people do with more free time. And that includes volunteering, which we really need.
Anne-Marie, we're running out of time, but another series of very vigorous nods by you there. What would you like to add as a sort of postscript to all of this? What's your sum up of what you've experienced here?
I think, it is a big journey to go on, and there are challenges. It's not easy within the organisation, but if you ask the people in your organisation for the answers in terms of helping you move to a 4-day week, it not only makes interesting work because people are personally removing those inefficiencies, the things that are a bit dull generally from the job that they're doing and aren't bringing the organisation very much value, and it's making them happier and more proud and looking forward to come to work. So it does work.
I only do a 2-hour week here. Perhaps I could become more productive. But I must say you've been two of the smiliest guests we've ever had on the sofa. So that is a very good advertisement in itself. Andrew Barnes and Anne-Marie Lister, smiling in support of the 4-day week. Coming up, she was the face of children's television in China, admired by millions. Then overnight, she found herself disgraced and was forced to escape into exile. Her story is after the break.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right. We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Uyghurs are an ethnic group with a distinct language and culture situated in East Turkestan. They're now ruled and persecuted by the People's Republic of China. The United States has described China's actions as a genocide, and human rights groups have accused Beijing of crimes against humanity there. Gulchera Hoja is a Uyghur who's presented a children's television program that celebrated her people's culture and folklore. But the show was increasingly censored. She moved to the United States, where she used her journalistic skills to tell the truth about Chinese actions in her homeland, particularly the detention of millions in internment camps. China designated her a terrorist and arrested more than 20 members of her family, including her infirm mother. Her new memoir, A Stone is Most Precious Where It Belongs, is a deeply moving page-turner. I'm now joined by Gulchera Hoja from the United States. Gulchera, it's wonderful to talk to you, and congratulations on the book. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you so much.
Tell me why China is persecuting Uyghurs. What threat do Uyghurs pose to the People's Republic?
As you know, our country, we Uyghurs call East Turkestan, where millions of Uyghurs and Kazakh, Kyrgyz, other minority lives thousands of years. They occupied our country from 1949. After that, they using long term of assimilation politics over 70 years, but didn't work out. All those Uyghurs and other minorities living in my country all have very beautiful and very old culture, their history. They're proud to be who they are. But Chinese government wants to just
wash out all those people's differences from Han Chinese, wants to how can we says reborn new nation, just like Chinese. But every culture is beautiful because of their difference. Just like flowers in the garden, we should celebrate, we should appreciate our difference, our culture. But CCP does the opposite way. They don't want allowed you different from Chinese, different. You have different obey than CCPs. That's why they want to. We call it's like maybe the last policy towards the Uyghurs and minorities, which is genocide. We are just...
Tell me, if you would, since you've gone to the United States and you've been working there as a journalist, what is the most shocking thing that you've discovered, in particular, about the internment camps? How many people are in the internment camps, do you think? And do they survive the internment camps? Do they die there, or are they eventually released?
As a journalist, we've been working on this particular issue, the genocide, from 2014, actually. Finally, in 2017, some researchers find out there actually physical camp existence. And based on the many organization, many other Western media who went to China and study, approximately 380 something the actual jail type those camps existence, but from 2019, because of the international campaign, international pressures, Chinese government turned into, says this is like vocational training centers. And then they move some of the people to work as a slave, forced labor. As we know, more than 3 million people being locked down on those camps, and maybe more people we can count in the forced labor facilities, but we never know the exactly number. And we had some very correct answer from some of the camp survivor who have dual citizenship or married to foreign, men who have able to escape from those camps. They said it's like death camps. You cannot out from those camps because they have unique position. They have other country help them. That's why few camp survivors right now living in US and Turkey, maybe and other countries, but we just talked to 16 to 20 of camp survivors until now.
May I ask you one other question? You had to take an extraordinarily difficult decision, was that you decided to speak out from the United States, knowing that your own family would be put into danger. And in fact, they were arrested and your mother was humiliated in the most appalling way. How did you arrive at that decision?
Because it's not only my family, it's millions of people. We've been talking to so many secondary camp survivors whose whole family sentenced 10 years, maybe life sentence. Even in my office, my colleagues' parents and siblings also detained. Even they couldn't reach out after 2016 to know what happened to their families. My situation is little better than them. I can even talk to my mother in the phone, so I could know what happened to my family. But so many people, situation is worse than mine. So this is, we are fighting for existence today. So I must take this action.
Gulfchera Hoja, I enormously enjoyed this book. It is a wonderful book. I thank you for your extraordinary courage in writing the book in the way that you've conducted yourself and in coming on GB News today. The book is called A Stone is Most Precious Where It Belongs. Coming up, the 17th century sunken warship that's finally yielding its treasures. And I'll try one of the nation's favourite takeaways ahead of the British Kebab Awards. That's after the news with Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom at 12:28. Rishi Sunak says he's giving it everything to achieve a new deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol, but has insisted it's not done yet. Speaking to the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister said he's hopeful of a positive outcome with the European Union. Describing it as unfinished business, he said it's vital to ensure a return to power sharing in the province. The DUP has refused to form an executive at Stormont in protest over the current Brexit deal. MP Sammy Wilson says the party hasn't seen any proposal yet.
What we do know is that there doesn't appear to have been any deal on this central issue which affects Northern Ireland, and that is the imposition of EU law. All of the problems that we face with not able to get goods from GB, checks on goods coming from GB and disruption to our economy stems from the fact that we're under a different set of laws than the rest of the United Kingdom, and therefore checks are required to make sure we're complying not with British law but with Brussels law.
Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a sixth person in connection with the attempted murder of an off-duty officer in Omagh. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was at a sports centre with his son on Wednesday when he was shot. He remains critically ill in hospital. Authorities in Italy say 45 people have died after a ship got into difficulties off the country's south coast. 27 bodies were found on a beach in the southern region of Calabria, and more have been found in the water. It's reported the boat left from Turkey and was carrying migrants from Somalia, Pakistan and Afghanistan when it crashed against rocks during rough sea weather. There were 81 survivors, with 22 in hospital. Social housing managers will be required to study for qualifications to drive up standards following the death of a 2-year-old boy. Awab Ishak died in December 2020 from a respiratory condition caused by mould at his home in Rochdale. The Housing Secretary Michael Gove announced the response after acknowledging that social housing residents are being inexcusably let down. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Michael.
Thank you, Bethany. In 1682, a warship carrying James Stuart, the future King of England and Scotland, ran aground off the coast at Great Yarmouth and sank, with the loss of many lives. It's one of those what-if moments. How would history have been different had the Catholic King James II never reached the throne? For over 300 years, the wreck of the Gloucester lay undiscovered on the seabed. It was found 16 years ago by two brothers, and this weekend some of its treasures go on display in Norwich. I went to take a look. The wreck lies out there, miles off the Norfolk coast. Its location, a closely guarded secret. Two divers, brothers Lincoln and Julian Barnwell, and their colleague James Little, were determined to find the Gloucester. And at last, in 2007, they succeeded. Gentlemen, how did you first have the idea of searching for the Gloucester?
One night I was just flicking through my book of shipwrecks and thought, let's go right back into the oldest date I could find. 1682 Gloucester, cannon on board and the Duke of York. And I just couldn't believe that was on our patch where we were diving anyway. So that night I rang up my brother and I said, are you up for it? And he said yes, and it began there.
How did you know where to look? What were the clues?
The secret is to find out where it isn't.
Well, that's a good point, yes.
You actually sort of plug the gaps like that, and with a magnometer, you tow it behind your boat at a certain speed, and it was just a matter of sticking at it and keeping our fingers crossed.
Tell me about that moment when you first saw the wreck.
You're going down the shot line, attached to the seabed, and then I just saw these lovely shadows on the seabed, which alerts you to wreckage, and they were sort of dotted around the seabed, so it wasn't a steel wreck standing upright. It seemed very interesting. So another 5 metres, I'm just kneeling there on the seabed, surrounded by these beautiful, massive cannons.
So that was in 2007, and we knew we had a historic site, but we didn't know it was the Gloucester. So we were always looking for some artefacts that we could rescue to 100% identify the site. And in 2012, we had this amazing moment where we were diving together, weren't we? Yeah, and we were diving together and found the ship's bell, and that was resting against the galley. And we recovered the bell and had it conserved, and it's got 1681 on, so that was our smoking gun, where we could definitely say we found the Gloucester.
How do you feel now that the stuff you brought to the surface is on exhibition in Norwich?
1 minute you're seeing this artefact on the seabed. It's almost like from creation to concept now, and you've seen it out there, and you conserved it, looked after it. It's ready to go to the museum, and now to see it in its case, in its pride and joy, it's just something really hard to explain, but very, very proud of it.
What does this discovery and the exhibition at the museum, what does that do for this part of Norfolk?
I hope it's something that people can be proud of and feel good about. We need a bit of good news sometimes, and hopefully this is a good news story for people.
We've always made everybody aware we're doing this for Norfolk. This is Norfolk's opportunity to have a 17th century Mary Rose, the Stuarts, it's on and Great Yarmouth. There's a lot of connection here with the history of Great Yarmouth. The Gloucester was fighting in the Sole Bay and the Battle of Lowestoft, so there's a rich history here, and we're hoping this will, if we get the museum in Great Yarmouth, for instance, that'll improve the area and be good for the county.
The wreck is probably split down the keel, with the stern, where the royal quarters would have been, lodged into the sand. Many priceless objects have been brought to the surface and feature in the exhibition The Last Voyage of the Gloucester here at the Castle Museum in Norwich. Professor Claire Jowett is one of the curators. But how excited are you about the wreck and about the exhibition?
Amazingly excited. This is an exhibition that's been 15 years in the making. It's the second life of the Gloucester, being able to share to people all over the island what an amazing 17th century warship, what a journey it was making, and the kinds of people that were on board. To share those stories is a real privilege.
What's come to the surface so far? What's excited you?
Oh, that's like choosing between one's children, but 149 bottles of wine, 49 with some contents, 29 with contents and my favourite word, ullage, which is air, still in them, a leather pouch that amazingly has 5 crowns stamped on it, and this is the crown of St Edward that was made for Charles II in 1661, and the crown that Charles III will wear in May this year. So amazing to have that royal insignia on the leather pouch. The bell was rescued weighing 20 stone when it first came up, but once conserved it's now, I think, lost about 8 stone, but it's beautiful. It's got a 1681 date on it, and that was decisive in identifying this as the Gloucester.
The exhibition just shows the potential for what may exist. This is not yet the whole haul from the ship.
What could be still under the seabed is truly incredible to think about.
The future King James II nearly drowned that day does it make you think about how different history might have been?
We might have a very different island story if James had drowned that morning. The glorious revolution of 1688, when William and Mary invaded and James lost his throne, might never have happened. Mary might have inherited in 1685 when her uncle Charles II died, but in 1682 it would have been possible that James's illegitimate son, the Duke of Monmouth, could have become the next James II, a different James II and 7th from the one that we got, and a Protestant king.
And if we're going to say that there might not have been a glorious revolution, no Battle of the Boyne either.
Exactly.
So the future King James II was lucky not to drown that day. Were there any other famous lucky survivors?
John Churchill, the future Duke of Marlborough, was accompanying James. He was his right-hand man. He was in his early 30s at the time, and of course a great military strategist for the country. George Legge, the Master of the Ordnance, was also on board, and of course Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist, was on an accompanying vessel, the Catherine yacht, and he witnessed with some horror describing how half-drowned people were picked out of the water, and he wrote about this just a few days later.
What do you think this exhibition, this find, means for this part of Norfolk, to have this splendid exhibition here?
I think it's a brilliant thing for Norfolk. We hope that this could be Norfolk's Mary Rose, telling British people about what happened on that fateful morning, allowing people to understand a 17th century ship and the types of people that were on board, not just the nobles. Potentially between 150 and 250 people died that day. We want to tell all their stories, not just of the elite, but of the servants, but of the crew, and of the lives that were affected by that tragic event.
We better send Julian and Lincoln back under the waves.
I think they will take on that mission.
I think they will. Thanks to Julian and Lincoln Barnwell, the divers, to Professor Claire Jowett, and also to Esther Morgan of the Norfolk Museum Services. The exhibition, The Last Voyage of the Gloucester, is at the Castle Museum in Norwich until the beginning of September. Alistair Stewart...
That Marlborough line at the end is almost a throwaway. I remember from A-level history, Malplaquet, Oudenarde, Blenheim, all of those great decisive battles.
It wasn't actually said in the package, but the Duke of Marlborough is the very fellow who won the Battle of Blenheim.
Yeah.
And if he'd died that day, history would have been very different. No, it's a fascinating thought. Do you mind if we come to
everything she needs?
Yes. Do you mind if we come to the present day?
Indeed so.
Do you think that we have seen a new Prime Minister, a new Rishi Sunak?
I do, funnily enough. The main thing we're talking about is how disappointing his pledge speech was, only to be done or outdone in disappointment stakes by Starmer's Mission, doing his Tom Cruise impersonation, which was not totally compelling. I couldn't get the thought out of my mind last night when I got the first clips online of what was going to be in the papers and actually seeing them physically this morning, that it's a new Rishi Sunak. This is a Rishi Sunak who's finally putting Boris Johnson back in his box and saying, I'll get Brexit done, no JCB diggers or going through walls or stuff like that. And he has a fire in his belly, which was totally absent when he delivered that deeply tedious pledges speech. And I think it may shift the territory a little for him personally and indeed for your party.
Well, that's very optimistic from Rishi's point of view.
Yeah,
we'll see what's going to happen. But I absolutely agree with your central point, which is that people saying what they're going to do is absolutely pointless unless you see what they actually can do. And what we are seeing at the moment is Rishi, trying to drive something through with a fair amount of political nous. He has been consulting. He's been talking to the business community to see whether the new red and green channel suits them. He has been talking to the unionists. He has been rolling the pitch. These are the things that he's been accused of not doing before. And much better, I think, to say simply, I'm going to spend the weekend in Downing Street sorting this out, rather than, as you saying, announcing a whole lot of pledges.
Sure. Also, interestingly, that there are a number of impartial observers as well, saying that he hasn't gone completely overboard to try and keep the ERG happy, and colleagues who were on GB News earlier today talking about it. seeking to carve out a niche for himself as his own man. This is what I want, this is what I will do. I'm consulting with the good folk of Northern Ireland. We regularly talk to the small businesses over there as well on our programme. It just brings you down to earth to think these are men and women just trying to make a living.
Do you want to mention one or two other things on your programme?
Yes, one I'm very excited about. The Victoria and Albert, that brilliant piece you just did on the Gloucester, the V&A have announced that they've spent a large amount of money buying up the David Bowie archive and memorabilia, and they are going to mount a big exhibition following in the footsteps of my favourite rock and roll band, which I think you may know, with Rolling Stones, who being great free marketeers and good capitalists, particularly Mr. Sir Mick, they did their own anyway. And also the brilliant Pink Floyd and David Gilmour, who's such a really lovely, lovely guy. They've done their own. And a lot of people going to the United States of America, Gracelands, for the King is still a must-go-to place. So I think it's quite exciting. Philip Kisley is a lecturer in modern culture at Leeds University and a great Rolling Stones fan as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the significance of remembering people who we grew up with and worshipped as fans, as it were.
Excellent stuff. Alistair will be here at 1 o'clock. Coming up, some may say it was the original fast food. The kebab is either a guilty late-night snack or a healthy, balanced meal. I'll find out after the break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The kebab industry is worth a staggering £2.2 billion to the UK economy. Kebabs are typically a meat dish of Middle Eastern origin, but recipes can take inspiration from around the world. Once considered the perfect blotter to soak up excess alcohol after a night out, some kebabs have come a long way. There are now healthy, vegan and daytime kebabs. The kebab can also provoke vicious tribalism between rivals swearing that their local shop serves the best in the land. The British Kebab Awards is a celebration of the industry and recognises neighbourhood restaurants and takeaways. I'm joined by Kadir Akan and Emir Akdeniz from Demshis restaurants in Eastbourne and Crawley. So, gentlemen, is this a field, the kebab, a field of great innovation and development? Is the kebab in a state of constant flux and change?
Of course, yeah. And you know,
everybody's they try to be healthy these days. And actually, Turkish cuisine or Mediterranean is definitely a healthy kitchen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Healthy? Tell me about that.
Protein, mostly. And, if you check our menu, 80% our foods are gluten-free.
Mm.
Yeah.
Amir, are you involved in the awards that are coming up?
Yes.
How are you involved?
Well, we are two family-run business, and we are involved in it as a top fine dining restaurant, qualified, and it's on Tuesday night, and we're hoping we will be the winners. We do this with passion, and kebab is passion. People, it's not just cooking. You have to put your heart in it, and it's freshly made daily, and it's become very popular in UK, as everybody knows. So we are involved in British Kebab Hours, top qualified, one of the top qualified restaurants, and we're hoping we are the winners. We're aiming to win. Yeah.
From which countries are your kebabs inspired?
Turkey.
All Turkey? You don't draw any inspiration from elsewhere?
No, actually, we have, not just Turkish cuisine, Mediterranean foods as well, like some pastas or seafood dishes. We call Kurdish, Turkish, plus Mediterranean foods.
Tell me about what we have in front of us. I should explain to the viewers at home that the studio is filled now with the most glorious aromas of kebab.
Thank you.
But it looks like you have a fair variety of different things here.
So actually, we have chicken shish and lamb shish here. As you see, chicken shish is like a big cubes.
But would you like to pass
just
over?
have a look.
Let's have a little look at that.
Lots of people.
Tell me about what I'm looking at there.
This is lamb shish and this is chicken shish. It's big cube, and chicken breast is a bit difficult to cook it. But if you try it, you will see it's very juicy and tender.
I'm certainly going to do that.
Yeah, of course. Feel free.
Well, it's lovely, actually.
Thank you.
Emir, tell me about the next one.
Right, this is lamb chops.
Mm-hmm.
And very nice, well-tended, juicy, charcoal-grilled lamb chops. And nicely marinated.
Is a kebab always made on a skewer? Is that necessary or not?
In a way, in some kebabs, yes. For example, that Adana kebab, which made of mince, lamb mince in Mediterranean restaurants, we mainly use lamb mince, and that is made from that. And it's got to be on a skewer, that one. It's a specialty for that. But this doesn't have to be on a skewer.
As a sign of how much the kebab is changing, I'm also joined by Rob Reams from Eat Planted, which makes plant-based meat replacements and sponsors the first vegan kebab category at the British Kebab Awards. Lovely to see you. Welcome to the programme.
Nice to be here.
Is this a great breakthrough, producing a vegan kebab?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's really in response to what the great British public want. 7 million TikTok viewers are looking to go and find a plant-based alternative to kebabs, and nearly 1 in 10 restaurant meals are vegan or vegetarian. So we're seeing an increasing demand for people wanting a plant-based alternative to kebab. So we feel that we're meeting that need and launching here in the UK with a vegan alternative.
And actually, what is this? From the gentleman, that looks quite meat-like, doesn't it?
Definitely. Yes.
But we're going to find out what it really is.
Yeah.
What have you got lurking in there?
Yeah, it's simply just a very clean ingredient list of pea protein, pea fibre, water, rapeseed oil, and a bit of vitamin B12 with some spices as well. It's a very, very simple product. It's made through a high moisture extrusion process, a bit like a pasta dough. And it's got the great texture and bite that you'd expect from a shish kebab. And
you're making this as a product that the public can buy?
That's right. So we're available online and available in Ocado and hopefully in other retailers later in the year. But we're also supplying the great British kebab industry, so in food service as well. So the likes of Amir and Kabir could also go and buy our product and to have on their restaurant menus.
Are you tempted by that, gentlemen? You're tempted to offer a vegan alternative? Yeah?
Yes, definitely we are.
We were going down the line here. What do we get to next?
So this is Adana kebab. It's
Adana
very
kebab,
traditional
of course.
one.
Would you mind passing that over?
There you go, of course.
Lovely. And the meat here is?
It's minced with
lamb.
Yeah, with this vegetables and seasonings.
Red cup, green cup, peppers, lamb mince.
Delicious.
Put on the skewer.
This is quite different. What's that one?
Yes, let's leave that one for last.
Oh, leave it for last,
Yes.
okay.
Dessert.
That's a chicken wings, the next one.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. And this one here.
So these are our hot messes, hot starters. This is sigara brie. It's a rolling pastry. We have falafel here. As you see, there's a batch of hummus under it. And this one is samosa.
It all looks absolutely delicious. So, Emir, why did we leave this one to last? What's that one?
The reason of that is a traditional Turkish dessert called baklava.
Oh, it's a baklava.
It's a baklava,
and
yeah.
it's covered in pistachio.
Yeah, it's them sheesh style that we make especially. We make ourselves, our chefs do it. A homemade traditional Turkish baklava, and it tastes delicious.
It's light. I mean, it's not very strong.
Where do you think the kebab shop fits into the community? What kind of role does it play? We think in the past of the pub as being the kind of centre of the village. Is the kebab shop very important to a community?
I mean, of course, I will tell you a story what happened recently. Actually, last 12th of February, last Sunday, we raised money for Turkey earthquake.
Yes.
And actually, we invite people to come dine with us on Sunday, and every single penny will be donated to Turkey victims.
Yes.
And then actually...
And that's focused on the kebab shop?
Yes, I mean, both branches, we host 550 people on that day, and we raised around £11,500, and we donated to these people. It was a big disaster, as you know. And as you see, it's a restaurant here. It's a key, it has a key role to bring all community together to do something nice in this kind of situation.
No, that's marvellous. I see that. And you're competing for the British Kebab Awards. I want to wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you so much.
What day is that? When will it be announced?
It's Tuesday. Yeah. I mean, there are 20 different categories, and we are finalists as fine dining restaurant. Hopefully, we will win it, and we want to bring it to our beautiful Eastbourne. I mean, they deserve it. It's a very beautiful town.
If you win it, we will certainly cover the news on GB News. You will hear it here first. The future of the kebab, Rob?
I think it's still a wonderful institution, as you rightly say, Michael, and we believe that now in the Great British community, people are asking for a vegan option, and if we can help provide that, then that will only mean that the kebab industry will go from strength to strength.
I suspect that this baklava is not vegan, I don't know, but I'm certainly going to enjoy it because I love baklava. I want to thank Kadir Akan, Amir Akdeniz and Rob Reams. Well, that's it for me. I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to be in New York seeing Hamilton. So please tune in next week. It's going to be Sunday with Arlene Foster. Thanks to everyone who's been on my show today. Thank all my guests. Thanks to you who have been watching. Alistair Stewart's up next. Cheers.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead for much of the week, it's going to be dry and settled. There will be a few showers at times though, pushing in from the North Sea. And the reason for this is high pressure is in charge. It remains over the UK right through the week ahead, keeping it largely dry. Though with a northeasterly breeze, a few showers will feed in, particularly across eastern areas. Through the rest of Sunday, we'll see clearing skies across much of central southern England and Wales, allowing a patchy frost to form. Northern England into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, we'll see a bit more cloud here as we move into the early hours, the risk of a few showers. Scotland also seeing those clear skies. Temperatures falling to -7, -8 across the glens of Scotland. Under the cloud, 3 or 4 degrees, and then a patchy frost also under the clear skies in the southwest. Cloud across eastern areas will push its way south and westwards quite quickly Monday morning, turning the skies quite grey, the risk of 1 or 2 light showers. Best of the sunshine holding on across northwestern parts of Scotland. There will be a few glimmers of bright or sunny spells elsewhere, but rather cloudy afternoon to come. Temperatures similar, 7 to 9 Celsius, so generally around average, perhaps if we get any sunshine in the southeast, creeping towards 10. Into the evening and overnight, Monday into Tuesday morning, we'll see variable amounts of cloud, probably more cloud compared to recent nights across England and Wales, meaning less risk of a widespread frost here. Perhaps under any clear spells, a patchy frost forming, staying quite cloudy for Northern Ireland. Clearest skies across Scotland, where temperatures once again falling below freezing. Towns and cities holding up a little bit higher compared to recent nights for the vast majority of us. So it does mean Tuesday will be a cloudier start to the day. Risk of showers moving in from the North Sea, perhaps a more organised band of rain and some hill snow moving into southeast England. One area to watch over the next few days, but largely staying dry. Temperatures generally around average. See you again soon.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.